I wonder if all of you have been listening to our radio commercials for the Max City Valley Awards Literature Festival. It is on this particular weekend, tomorrow and day after, Saturday and Sunday. As you listen to this on a Friday morning, we hope you're going to make it. Entry is absolutely free. The venue is the National Gallery of Modern Art. And this is actually the second edition of the Max City Literature Festival. And I'm very pleased to have Probal Dasgupta with me, the author and one of the principal people and voices behind the Max City VOW Literature Festival. Hi, Probal. Wonderful to talk to you. How are you?
Hi, Hrishi. Wonderful. Very happy to be here. Delighted to be part of the show. Thanks for inviting me.
28th and 29th at the National Gallery of Modern Art, the Max City Literature Festival comes back for its second edition. What did edition 1 teach you about what Mumbai actually wants from a literature festival is my opening question.
Thank you. Well, when we started the Literature Festival last year, one of the things that was uppermost in our minds, which also continues to be so, is to celebrate the differences. Mumbai city is one where you have, anyone can come to Mumbai and make it big for himself or herself. So Mumbai city stands for embracing different ideas, different views, different works. So as a literature festival, we didn't want it to be a regurgitation of books and authors, but with the purpose of putting forth a platform for different voices, newer ideas, as well as looking at contemporary issues. Mumbai is the gateway to the world as far as India is concerned. So we have issues that impact our businesses, our lives, etc. A city that is always alive. So I think that is the purpose, was to create Mumbai as a center for non-fiction works which are about issues that impact us and are those which are influenced by us as well.
I love that you say Mumbai is India's gateway to the world, in a sense through the waters of the Arabian Sea.
Right.
My question is, I find it fascinating that you literally repurposed a literature fest idea towards geopolitics, maritime affairs, business history, and soft power. I want to understand how you managed to involve the Navy, the Ministry of Culture, and Mahindra Defence to get on board for what is actually a literature festival.
Yes. So, these various aspects are not isolated from one another. Books and governance, history. We talk about history of geography, politics of geography. All of these are related to the larger subjects of, strategy, Indian affairs, in the world, India's interests, and also local issues. So, to put it simply, in a world today that is riven by wars and conflicts and unbridgeable opinions, the one prime casualty has been the space for dialogue, discussion, and debates. That's a shrinking space. So my co-founders, Commodore Kesnur, Sanjeev Chopra, Eka Banerjee, Mangesh Sawant, and the entire team, we felt last year, and we continue to believe, that the raison d'etre of Max City VOW Litfest is to provide a platform to engage, embrace, and celebrate differences. It's only then can you shape ideas and approaches to the vexing issues, the problems, etc.
I want to come to the theme for this year, One World, Many Words. Last edition, I think you spoke about issues that engage us as a nation.
Right.
This one is very pointed. One world, many words. Talk to me about the importance and the essence of this particular theme.
So when you look around, you have wars and conflicts, you have various issues. For instance, the war in Iran impacts the markets here, impacts the LPG as we speak. There are issues around gender. There are issues around AQI. There's a panel that talks about Mumbai city between AQI and building dreams. So you're caught between two different aspirations. So you have many worlds around us that you have, but we live under that one roof of the earth, which is what we call the earth, the one world, and we have many. When we say many words, we talk about the many opinions that are there, many opinions about issues, which is why we have these different panels and different speakers bringing in their different perspectives. So if you have an issue, if you have a panel on, for instance, on delimitation, the politics of geography and delimitation that we are soon going to encounter, we have voices that argue on both sides. When we talk about history or geography, we have a panel on whether Dhurandhar, for instance, is a shift in Indian cinema. And again, there's no right or wrong. Today, we seem to have opinions, we seem to hold opinions. What we aspire to do is to provide a platform for various opinions. We don't necessarily have to shape an opinion. We have to engage and embrace different opinions. That's why in one world, we have many words which we try and assemble over the 2 days on on one platform, that's Max City.
Very well said. For those of you who've just tuned in, Max City _ Litfest. At Max City _ Litfest is the Instagram handle. They're very active. So if you want a schedule, a day-wise schedule with timings for day 1 and day 2, 20th and 29th of March, it's up there on Instagram, and you can go check it out. Choose the sessions you attend or just make a day of it. There are only 2 venues, and you can fit from one venue to another. Now, you're wearing multiple hats this weekend, Probal, co-founder, organizer, speaker on your own book. I'm going to come to your own book later, but right now the other sessions. On day 1, you're in the opening section alongside Dr. Sanjeev Chopra, and then you're moderating the panel US-Iran War, the Future and India's Choices on day 2. I find it fascinating that you would mentally shift between being the host and being the subject, but that's the matter for another interview. But tell us what these 2 sessions are about before we go to the one on Sundarji.
Yes. So the welcome to the Litfest is about what the 2 days constitute, and much of what I have already said, so all of those things, as well as bringing the festival to the audience. It's not so much only about the hosts and the speakers, it's also about involving the audience. So the idea is also to get many first-time authors, speakers, and also participation of a younger crowd here, and that's why the contemporary issues. The focus on welcoming the Litfest is about impressing upon the audience the fact that these are all contemporary issues. These are issues that involve the youth, the young, as well as people who are older. It's about all of these things that happen around us. That's specifically why we chose non-fiction works as the focus point of the Litfest. Just to sort of you spoke about the panel, and I make a shift to the second day's panel on West Asia, the war in West Asia. Simply put, one of the things that links it to the festival is that you cannot expand the Hormuz Straits, but you can expand the space to interact about it. That's what we aim to do. That today we're fighting over things, we have various issues, but this is what we'd like to do. We'd like to have various opinions on it. As far as the US-Iran panel is concerned, I was joking to somebody the other day that, if you had this panel last week, maybe we would have been talking something else. And today we may have something else to discuss on the US-Iran war. This was supposed to be on day 1. Now we've pushed it to day 2. I think there'd be, by the time we land on Sunday, we probably have different issues to discuss about the ongoing war, which is changing by the day, which is actually emblematic of the world we live in, Hrishi, how we are not, it's a very nebulous state of affairs, and that's why there's no opinion that is right or wrong. And as far as the war is concerned, one of the 2 issues that I'd like to focus on, one is where are we heading? What do we all know the facts, we have data, so the important part is not to sort of regurgitate the data, but also understand from an analysis point of view where we're heading. Number 2, what does it mean for us? What does it mean for India? What are India's choices, political choices? Does India, this is a very important part of our history at this point, given that, it's the first time the Hormuz Strait has been challenged, and we are sitting on the edge of something nastier, or we're probably rolling back to relative safety or relative peace. Where are we, and how does it impact India? Where does India stand as a nation? So some of these things that we discussed that day, we have 2 wonderful panelists. We have Ambassador T.C.A. Raghavan, who's an authority on the subject, and we have Minaz Merchant, whose recent book, An Era of India, is out, and that's a fantastic book that talks about the importance of India in this vastly changing world. So we're going to have a very interesting, fascinating discussion. I'm looking forward to it. And as I said, we might be talking about something quite different on that day, given the state of affairs and the rapid changes the situation has made in the recent weeks.
Okay, I just wanted to add to everybody who's watching or listening, the Homi Bhabha State University is also a venue this year. So I mentioned the National Gallery of Modern Art. There's also the Homi Bhabha State University. Okay, for those of you living under a rock, Probal Dasgupta has written this wonderful book called General Brass Tacks. It came out in January of this year. I'm actually halfway through it, and I can't wait to get through the other half. He's been kind enough to send the book to me. And the session titled 5 Assassinations and an Arms Deal, the General Sundarji story, is quite an arresting headline, Probal. I'd like you to walk us through what that panel is going to look like, and most importantly, what you hope the audience is going to walk away with.
Right. So, it was carefully sort of chosen. I realized while writing the book that there are indeed so many of these events that happened in that decade, deadly decade as I call it, The turbulent, tempestuous, explosive 1980s was non-stop action. Each month saw drama. Each year had events. The entire decade was box office theater. We had 5 assassinations and an arms deal, as the subject says. Which are these assassinations? We know of 2, Mrs. Indira Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi. I'm talking about top drawer political assassinations. I wouldn't reveal the next 3 because then I'd leave the audience to sort of
Fair enough.
where they land. And the arms deal is the Bofors one. But the interesting thing is the story. The story is not about that alone. It's about the gentleman who's at the center of it all, General Swami Sundarji, the only chief, Indian Army chief, who influenced political choices in a democracy and leaves behind a rich and profound legacy, albeit a disputed one. Because for somebody who is revered or reviled, liked or hated, there was not a single day of his life that was without drama. So a spectacular decade, lots of things happening. So Sandeep Punyathan and I would unpack an explosive discussion of about 60 minutes. And I think that is something that will, those have some of these stories, the scenes behind some of these stories, the linkage, what happened, and how this decade actually shaped the course of India as we entered 1990s.
Okay, but just more deep diving into the book. I wonder when you realized the arc of Sundarji's life actually coincided almost exactly with the journey of our young nation after 1947. I mean, you do say in the book he was present at Mahatma Gandhi's funeral. He raised the tricolor on Pakistani soil on the very first Independence Day. He was there during partition riots. At what point in your research did that parallel hit you?
Rishi, what happens when you start to write a book is that, when you begin to write one and you have a chat with the publishers, you believe that you know most of it. All you need to do is to research a few other things and stitch it all together in one beautiful narrative. What you discover is that you know very little of it. And then that's when you take that journey. And as an author, you take that journey of mining these little nuggets and stitching them into one narrative like a magpie. And at the end of it, when the book ends and the journey ends, you feel sad. And then now it's time for the reader to pick it up. To your question, when did I realize? Well, I believe, when I started the book, I thought 1980s would be the center point of it all because all of these are public memories in our heads. But as I started to research, I realized, and Sundarji had made some notes in his, of his early life, which helped because it sort of revealed what he was thinking, what was going on. And some of these things were revelations, absolute revelations. For instance, we talk about him joining the funeral of Mahatma Gandhi. He was playing basketball in Delhi when he got a phone call saying that, Mahatma Gandhi has just been shot. Please rush to the Birla House. When he goes to Birla House, he finds himself under Jawaharlal Nehru as somebody who he's reporting to. And Nehru says, well, wait here, look after the Birla House with your 100 boys while I go to AIR, do my speech and come back. And Sundarji writes that he goes to AIR and delivers his famous speech, "The light has gone out of our lives." So Sundarji is this person who sees riots on both sides during partition, who raises the tricolor in Pakistan on the 15th of August, 1947, which is very rare. And then he rescues refugees from Pakistan into India, and then, offers sort of rescues refugees from India into Pakistan. It sees violence on both sides. That kind of enabled me to understand the personality behind the man as he grew up. And he's kind of, his life runs parallel to the post-independence history of India, which was a revelation for me. He joined just after the World War. And it's not so much of a military story, but the political history of our country seen through the eyes of this very important and central protagonist. So it was all of these details, all of these nuggets were really revelatory. And I felt, as an author, something that I came out enriched by all of these little details and information.
Operation Brass Tacks, obviously your book's title is derived from that. It's described as one of the largest military exercises since World War II. And it rattled Pakistan's nuclear ambitions, compelled General Zia-ul-Haq to seek rapprochement with New Delhi. Yet, Probal, most Indians have never heard of it. I find it astounding. Why has something this significant been so thoroughly forgotten, is my question.
Well, Hrishi, what happens is that in India, most of the history that is written that involves the military is not as popular among people outside. What I wanted to do, therefore, is to de-jargonize, to make it more available, which I've done with my 2 previous books as well, to de-jargonize the story, the movement, the armed forces, mobilization, etc. Make it, convert it into a non-fiction narrative that would rather read like a story and get people engaged. Why it hasn't been told as often. Like, for instance, General Sundarji's biography has never been written. This is the first one. He's the most important general that we've had. People write about Sam Manekshaw. Initially, someone approached me to write about Sam Manekshaw, and we believe in doing the same thing over and over again. I realized that this man has not been written about. Most important general, again, brass tacks is something that you spoke of, not written much. Except for certain books that do have accounts of brass tack, but those are academic accounts. This story is about this mobilization. As you said, it was so big. It was 4 times the biggest NATO exercise. It was the biggest mobilization since Second World War. It was that big. It had rattled General Zia because General Sundarji had this plan that if we take our minds back to the borders of India and Pakistan, along the Rajasthan and Punjab borders, the idea was to hold Pakistani attacks if there were. It was an exercise not meant to go into war, but if there was one involving Pakistan, he would hold off the Pakistani forces on the Punjab front and launch Indian strikes through Rajasthan into the Pakistani deserts and take out the then fledgling Kahuta reactor. There was a nuclear facility. There was also planned then Operation Trident, which is not known even among military officers, even among military scholars. It's about Operation Trident, which was to recapture 2 areas in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, in Skardu and Gilgit. So these are things that that I needed to string together through secondary sources, through accounts of people who were involved. But yes, many of these stories that actually influence the path of the nation. That's what I always say. This is not military history; it's political history. It could have changed the path. It always had an impact. Sri Lanka, brass tacks, Siachen, all of this happened, and this is about the history and geography of our country.
You write that Sundarji was willing to walk the fine line between the bold and the brazen, attracting supporters and detractors in equal measure. After all your research and interviews, Probal, where do you personally land? Was General Sundarji India's greatest military strategist or India's most dangerous military strategist?
I think he was India's most important military strategist. I'll just tweak it a little bit. We all talk about Sam Manekshaw, but I think General Sundarji had the biggest influence, the biggest impact. He was the only military chief who's had an influence in the political choices we made, political dispensation that was in governance, and the choices that we as a nation made in the 1980s. Dangerous? Well, the fact that, he had brought India and Pakistan close to war in brass tacks could also be seen as a move that resulted in Zia coming and asking India to join hands for peace. So what was intended possibly as an exercise moved towards a warlike scenario, then moved towards peace. So, you could argue both sides. And that's the drama that involved in, which is what fascinated me right through as a subject. Certainly the most important general. And, we had pushed 6 divisions into, which is, thousands of troops into Sri Lanka at the end of the 4-year Sri Lanka, campaign, which many don't know about, again, 1987 to 1990, about 3.5, 4 years. So in that campaign, many died. There were so many casualties. It's also referred to as India's Vietnam. The unintended consequences of India going to Sri Lanka was that in 1991-92, and our generation is the Kashmir Commission generation, when we were hurled into a new insurgency in Kashmir that had come up in the 1990s. There were many people, 80,000 veterans who had spent time in Sri Lanka, who were ready for the Kashmir insurgency in the 90s to face that insurgency. So the unintended consequence of his tenure was also to prepare an army for the future. It is said, and I would say this as a line meaning for him, he held the army by its bootstraps and the strategic thinking, and hauled them into the 21st century.
You know, you describe in the book's introduction your personal memory of hearing about Operation Blue Star as a schoolboy, seeing the newspapers, then being sent home early when Indira Gandhi was assassinated. How much of writing this book was personal excavation for you, Probal, as someone who grew up in that decade?
You know, Hrishi, you mentioned about Indira Gandhi's death. You know, I actually went around asking, what were you doing when this news came in? Many of us were in school, some were in high school, some were in college, but we all lived through, many of us, I mean, not all, but many of us lived through the 1980s. And we have all of these events in our memories, in the recesses of our memories, and wherein we know what we were doing. You know, it was a non-tech, so to say, generation where we were not really sort of involved in a flurry of things. So, you know, each of these events stand out as memory in our heads. So, you know, 1980s, for instance, and I write this about 1980s in one of the chapters, that it had the highs and the lows. The 1983 Kapil Dev victory, we sent the first man into space, Rakesh Sharma, not many remember today. But then we also had the Bhopal gas tragedy. We also had the Khalistan movement. We had all of these assassinations. So this non-stop action of 1980s, which, as you rightly said, is a lived experience in our memory. And that kind of gave me motivation to dig deep and figure if I knew little or I needed to know more. And I think that was kind of motivation enough for me to write down that memory lane and figure out what was happening. I remember talking to my father those days, and he would talk to me about all of these things that were happening. I still remember General Sundarji being at the middle of many of these conversations. I'm so lucky that Penguin, Random House, and Millie, the publisher, liked the idea, and we went ahead with the book, and that's how it all happened. Give me a chance to dig deep and go down memory lane and mine into those issues which I so love to pull out and write about.
General Brass Tacks, which is Probal Dasgupta's book, also has a wonderful endorsement by Shashi Tharoor, and I quote, he calls the book fast-paced as a thriller and rigorous as a serious academic work. Those are usually opposites, Probal. And my question stemmed from that comment. How do you actually write military history for a general audience without dumbing it down or losing the academics? It's not easy. It's a tricky business.
Right. So, Hrishi, yes, absolutely. Great question. I never saw it as military history. So I saw it as history. And that enabled me to de-jargonize it because I knew who I was writing for. I was writing for an audience which needed to know, like you said a short while ago, that people don't know about these things. So I didn't want it to be restricted to cantonments or military libraries or scholars alone. I wanted people to know, and that's one of the reasons why I tried to write in a manner that adopted the current style of a non-fiction narrative. And I've done that with my previous books, Watershed 1967 on India and China, and a book on stories. That adopting a non-fiction narrative allows you to travel as a story and also be able to balance that with specific inputs and deep research. The idea is not to get lost in the rabbit hole, but to also stay alive and look around as to how your story is traveling. And you're right. I think that was one of the things I had to straddle. And I'm very delighted that Shashi Tharoor felt that it addressed both parts of the writing and reading. So I'm hoping that is something that people would love to read, and I'm really an optimist there. So yes, it was good to write, and it's never a bad thing to have a good comment on it, and especially when you're attempting to do deep research and also ensure that it's readable and you find that's landed well. You're a satisfied author.
Well, if you want to meet Probal Dasgupta, 28th and 29th of March, tomorrow, Saturday the 28th, and day after, Sunday the 29th, in Mumbai, the National Gallery of Modern Art and the Homi Bhabha State University. Two venues is the Max City Litfest. It's the Valley of Words Literature Festival, and the theme this year is One Word, Many Words. And the schedule is up at maxcity_litfest on Instagram, maxcity_litfest. A weekend of words is really coming, and we urge you to go and flock there in large numbers. Everyone is invited. Entry is absolutely free. Just come and enjoy yourself. Just a little bit about some of the stalwarts who are going to be there. I understand Amish Tripathi is going to be there. Kiran Mandral, Shunali Khullar Shroff, you're doing the Navy sessions. So some luminaries from the Indian Navy, if you could run us through attendance in terms of speakers and panelists that you'd like to draw attention to.
Yes. So we have a bunch of very exciting panels. We have Ambassador T.C.A. Raghavan. We have Amish Chapati, Minaz Merchant, Nusrat Jafri, Saurabh Mukherjee who's speaking on finance, and Shinjini Kumar, Brijesh Singh. You have Sanjeev Chopra himself. You have very, very interesting panels. Politics of geography, the US-Iran war we spoke about. We have a panel on gender. We have a panel on mentoring, and where Akash Kurana speaks about it. There's a panel on wealth and womanhood. There's oceans in outer space. Chaitanya Giri talks about his recent book. There are a whole bunch of, there's one on Durandar, like I said, more contemporary. We have, again, we spoke about the academic issues and issues that are contemporary. So we have tried to merge both those of those issues. And we also, there's a panel on Sindoor, which involves Tom Cooper and his co-authors Mangesh Sawant. We have a session on Tom Cooper and Mangesh Sawant's book called 88 Hours, which talks about how, the things that happened in those 88 hours between India and Pakistan. Again, a very objective account. So we have a host of different kinds of sessions. We have one on AQI and the air we breathe in the city. We have Luis Miranda and Nidhi Chaudhary and others. And so, yes, so there is a bunch of different kinds of sessions. And I can promise you, Hrishi, people have lots of different panels to pick and choose from, and going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, my last question is, you're a former Army officer, a Columbia-trained international affairs scholar, a founder of a global advisory firm, columnist, and now a biographer. That's a very unusual combination of lives to bring to a single book. And when you look back upon your life, do you think this biography could have been written by anyone who hadn't lived at least some of what you have lived?
That's very generous of you, Hrishi. I think I have what has fascinated me as I've traveled along in life, and I think after the decade in the armed forces, the idea of, I served in the infantry with Gurkhas, so I came out and I've traveled in the corporate, in the academia, and in the world of writing. But I think one of the things that I've realized is that, when you choose to do what you love to, you generally enjoy. I mean, you're always bound to enjoy. What I wanted to do in the 20s was different from what you want to do in the 30s, and then in your each time. And it's not so that, it's not something that you need to be very, very stiff about. If you can change the preferences of what you want to do today, and it'll be different from what you wanted to do earlier. So I think all of these kind of converge into a set of experiences. When I look at writing books, I think, the fact that, they've been several careers kind of matures my thinking, perhaps. And so as long as you're enjoying it in the head, I think you can travel. And it's been a happy journey thus far. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Please do enjoy the Max City Valley Awards Literature Festival 2026. And thank you, Probal, for this wonderful conversation. All the best in everything that you do. Cheers.
Thank you, Hrishi. Pleasure's mine. Thank you very much.